Welcome to the Near Memo, a weekly conversation about search, social, and commerce. What happened, why it matters, and the implications for local. Welcome back to the Near Memo with David, Mike, and Greg. And today we have a extra special guest, Cyrus Shepard, who's a researcher extraordinaire, SEO, renowned SEO, former SEO Moz consultant, or Moz SEO consultant, I should say, and kind of at the center of a lot of the debate these days about the HCU and search quality in general and ranking factors. And so we're delighted to have you with us. Cyrus, thanks for joining us.
Oh, thanks, Greg. It's good to be with this room of experience, people I've admired and worked with for years. David and I used to work at Moz together, so happy to be talking with you today.
Okay, and we are happy to be joined by another Fort George aficionado, my favorite brewery.
Yes.
So, Cyrus.
Yes, for those that don't know, Fort George is a brewery on the West Coast. I happen to live across the street from the guy who founded it. I ran into him today. He was holding an apple pie that he baked for the brewery's 17th birthday. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. But if you have a chance to try Fort George beer, it's great. We're not paid to plug this.
Brought to you today by our sponsor, Fort George Beer. So we thought we would talk about a number of different things today. Cyrus, your study that you recently published on-page ranking factors in the wake of some recent core updates, your experience as a quality rater, which I think is really interesting, and then sort of general observations and thoughts about where Google is, the state of SEO, and kind of where things are headed. So why don't we jump in with your study? I mean, there's a lot of data in there. Why don't you tell us what you did and at the highest level what you found, and we'll kind of go from there.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think I want to, like a lot of SEOs, when a lot of Google updates happened around September, October last year, clients started reaching out, started doing consultations, and everything was a guess at that point. Google says, create helpful content, and here's some questions to self-assess, but nobody understands what's going on. And to this day, we're in March. We've seen shockingly few recoveries, in the industry. When Penguin hit, when Panda hit, occasionally those algorithms were very different, but we'd start to understand why Google demoted a certain site. And with this update, people are just, myself included, don't understand what Google means when they say helpful content, and Google themselves are very opaque about it. So I just started collecting sites that won and lost, and started diving into the data and trying to get a correlation between factors that, Google seemed to be rewarding and demoting at the same time. Some things were really obvious, like ads, but some things were much more surprising. So that was the genesis of this study, I would say.
Well, so why don't you unpack that a little bit? What was obvious and what was surprising?
Well, so one of the obvious thing was the use of ads. Really heavy ads use. We've seen a lot of Mediavine sites, Raptive, on these big ad networks. That was one of the largest negatively correlated factors. And I want to preface this by saying, I don't want to give the assumption that these are actual ranking factors. These are just qualities associated with sites that went up or down. And that's a whole other conversation. Google uses a lot of machine learning. So, we're just looking for qualities of sites. So yeah, ads was a huge one. Anything with a fixed ad that, covered the content when you scroll, that increased your chances of getting hit by the HCU by like 50 to 60% in some cases, and which is frustrating because sometimes you'll go to a site that's killing it and they have ads all over the place, and you're like, why did this site survive the HCU and another site didn't? But we'd like to say these things are just risk factors. Like you may be a smoker and you may live to 100. That doesn't mean smoking is healthy. That increases your chance of dying early. And I think that's a good way to describe these ads and UX elements that Google is targeting.
And then what was positively correlated? I mean, you have a chart that I think has been reproduced a lot and shared on social media, which shows the top, bottom, and then sort of in the middle where things were more ambiguous. So tell us about the top positive correlation factors.
So one of the things I looked at a lot of different things. One of the things that Google announced before the helpful content update came out was this idea of experience. We have EAT, expertise, authority, trust. Late last year, they added experience to this, and they changed their quality rater guidelines. Said sites should demonstrate firsthand knowledge or expertise that's unique to everybody else. So I was trying to think, how would that be displayed on the page? It would be something like sites explaining how they did something. So I looked for first-person pronouns and first-hand experience. Like, are they describing something that they did themselves? Or do they have unique pictures? Are they explaining a process, how they made a recipe or something like that? And those were the highest correlated factors. So first-person pronouns, I think, was the highest correlated factor. Something around like 0.35, which is pretty significant, which was kind of surprising. I was really surprised how high and strong it was. And even to this day, when I look at sites that are winning and won, my mind is automatically going to the use of I, we, us, and you just see them all over the page. Maybe that's just pattern recognition on my part, but I see Ghost everywhere at this point. So yeah, lots of firsthand experience.
So what were some other things that were positively correlated with winning under HU?
A lot of contact information, surprisingly or not surprisingly. Google in their quality raters talks about looking. There's been a lot more emphasis in the last couple of years in the quality rater guidelines about looking who is responsible for the website, who created the content, and does this person have that expertise? So I look for contact information in the head, the footer. Do they have a dedicated page? Do the authors have, their email address, things like that? So contact information was highly correlated. Again, I don't think these are ranking factors. I think they're just features of sites associated with higher rankings. Interestingly, I found far more negative correlations than I did positive correlations. It's kind of like that firsthand experience just trumped everything else. And if you didn't have that and you had a lot of ads on your site, you were delegated to the refuge bin.
Well, so give us a sense of those additional. You talked about ads, fixed banners, and things like that, or fixed ads. What are some of the other things that you saw that were negative?
Use of stock images, which is, again, not that surprising. And when I say stock images, I mean any image. I had a set of criteria trying to define these things against site. Any site, any page that had images that were not original, even if they were licensed from a stock image site or that taken from somebody's Instagram page, things like that. They only were qualified as not stock images if they were completely original. I had to do a lot of Google reverse image search, TinyEye, things like that. Notifications. Any site that had a pop-up that said allow notifications, again, not a ranking factor, but those sites were 100% in the negative column. And I think one of the reasons of that a lot of people missed, AJ Cohn. Glenn Gabe, SEO, great guy. Follow him on Twitter. He noticed that Google made a small product announcement last year that said they were going to be incorporating UX elements into the helpful content update. So I think that's why we see a lot of things like ads, notifications, poor UX design that got lumped into this helpful content update. Sorry, kind of rambled there.
No, not at all. What about AI images? Did you investigate that? I mean, those are sort of in a weird third category.
Yeah, I took note. I didn't. In the study, I ran into very few sites that were actually using AI images. And I think maybe as marketers, we tend to see them more often than the general web. But when I was actually doing the study, I ran into them like once or twice, and it just wasn't enough to collect meaningful data. So yeah, I use them all the time, but I don't think the general web has caught up to maybe our usage of them.
I see them on CNN quite frequently. Like if you go down to the sort of chum area, the taboola stuff or whatever, there's a lot of sort of human faces and images that are I'm sure AI generated these days.
Yeah.
So can I ask a question? Did you pick these attributes because of the search quality raters guidelines, or because these are things that drive you fucking nuts?
Yeah. So I was grasping at straws a little bit, Mike. That's an excellent question. Just trying to think of things, we've seen these traditional ranking factor studies over the years. They all do, word count, how many incoming links, what's the DA of the site. and those are all, what we'd call factors. But with Google moving into more machine learning, I wanted to look at things that, quality raters would actually be looking at, things that are hard to quantify by the numbers. So I was just kind of thinking about all the different ways that quality raters might be looking at sites, some of the Google statements about the UX elements, and just making a big long list. And sometimes I'd get nowhere. I think I spent 2 months collecting. I had to collect most of these by hand, and a lot of them were just human value judgments. Does this page demonstrate firsthand experience or does it not? That's something that I couldn't feed into a computer and get a yes/no answer. So I just had to check a box here, just like a Google quality rater would, and go from there. So yeah, a lot of it was guesses. A lot of it was just like, what would I be looking at if I was trying to judge these sites on experience? And it'd be interesting to expand it out to other people and ask them, people in the SEO industry, what do you think Google would be looking at in these areas? But yeah.
And so when you do that as a quality rater, I don't want to get ahead of us here, but are you expected to do that on a site-wide basis or a page basis?
Most of the time, a page basis, but there are certain signals that are site-wide, like what is the website reputation? What are other people saying about the site? Does the website have contact information? Which is where that data point came from, because that's one of the things that quality raters are instructed to look for. But most of the time, quality raters are rating the page, but looking at the expertise of the site to see if they're qualified to publish this page, if that makes sense.
So you're saying that the site signals influence your take on the page? Is that essentially how you would articulate that?
Yeah, absolutely. You're looking at, let's say I'm looking at barbecue grills. I have a page about barbecue grills. I'm looking at it. What is the quality of the page? But then any quality rater is going to be looking at the rest of the site saying, do these people have expertise in barbecue grills, or are they writing about crypto and finance advice? That I know that's probably just a spam article site. But if this entire site has 500 pages dedicated to barbecue grills, I'm like, okay, it seems like they've been testing them. They know what they're talking about. That site-wide expertise is going to influence that page level rating in that situation.
So that gets to a question I had, Cyrus, which is, you may not have this like actually broken out. If you do, I'd love to see it. But how would you categorize the sites that you included in this study? Were most of them sort of e-commerce product driven? Were there news sites? Were there medical sites? Like what's the breakdown of sort of with the at a high level, what types of sites you're looking at?
So that's an excellent question, and there might have been some bias that I'll admit to in the site selection, because I was mostly relying on publicly available people who have talked about spotted sites that have gone up or down, and also some of the data providers like Ahrefs, Citrus, winners and losers. But I tried to make most of the sites what I would call, I don't want to use the word niche sites, but just general publishers that were affiliate or ad marketing, ad affiliated, ad supported. I did not look at sites like, big mega sites like CNN or Reddit or things like that.
And you weren't looking at like Best Buy or TripAdvisor or like known brands that are,
right. Okay. I tried to keep these, somewhat smaller sites that wouldn't be insulated, more susceptible to being hit by a big Google update. Try to keep them like that. Good question.
Were any of these local sites, meaning serving a specific geography, or small business websites?
For the most part, no. And that's most of the time they were more national or international sites. I'm not sure that there were any very hyper localized sites in the data set.
So what would you say are you have a sort of summary and a bunch of recommendations at the end of that study, which we'll link to in the show notes. What would you say were the biggest takeaways from your investigation here?
Biggest takeaways, we kind of touched on it, but demonstrating firsthand experience. That if anybody who lost in the helpful content update, looking at those pages where travel is a great example. There were, I think, 3 or 4 travel sites in the data set that both went up and down. The people who were the question I have to ask myself when I'm looking at a page, could I have written this page if I just did a lot of research online? And if that is the case, there's a good chance that the site went down in traffic. But if I'm demonstrating, like, here's a picture of me at the Sistine Chapel, here's what our visit was like. When I walked into the hotel, I was greeted by the concierge. Those pages tended to do pretty well. So demonstrating that firsthand experience, you want to create content that not anybody else can create just by doing a lot of research on the internet, which kind of bleeds over into our, a conversation about AI, because that's exactly what AI can do. AI can create a page on anything and be an expert on it. But AI can't walk into the hotel and demonstrate personal knowledge. And that seems to be where, coincidentally or not, that Google wants to reward those personal human-based signals. And I don't know if they anticipated the rise of AI and the rise of AI content, but that seems, I think they were just responding to, all the SEO tools that teach you how to pump out content that all looks like everybody else. And they're trying to reward human-based signals. So that's the big one, human-based content.
I guess I would have to disagree that AI can't do that, because I feel like I could feed, if you had a certain, like best hotels in Mykonos or whatever, you can feed the top 10 results that fit this model into Notebook LLM, and the AI can generate a perfectly believable first person experience.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's the other thing. This stuff can be faked. So I don't know if Google is sophisticated enough to determine if it's faked or not. But yeah, if you're creating content with LLMs, maybe tell it to, write in a first person voice. I don't know.
To what extent, though, did images figure into that determination of experience?
That's a really good question. That kind of gets into the weeds of the study a little bit, and I don't have the data to prove it, but I was looking at photos and videos where people were posting, and some of them were awesome. I remember this one site that posted gym videos, and they would very unique gym photos, workouts. The site was excellent. It did have some UX problems. It didn't seem to help. It seemed more like, and I don't have the data for this, but reviewing all these sites by hand, it was more in the text, and Google didn't seem to be able to reward the photos and videos as much as they did the text. And that's totally anecdotal, but Google just didn't seem to be able to distinguish that as well.
That's on the upside, but you noted on the downside that stock photography seems to have a negative impact.
Yeah, and Google, again, pattern matching. Google has records of every, photograph that they capture, and they're very good these days at identifying photos, and they can, if you've tried Google Lens, they can identify the original source of any photo, and that's primarily what I used in the study. But
so they're not reading the photos themselves; they're doing this background matching between stock photography or images that have been captured from some other source, and your images. They can do that. I don't know if they're doing that in the algorithm, but we did see a pretty negative association with stock photography use. I've been advising my clients, it's almost in the site. It was almost pages that had no photographs, was correlated with a higher chance of ranking than sites that use, even one stock image. So I'm advising my clients these days, just get rid of all your stock images, replace them with something else, do something unique. And if you have to use stock images, do something unique with them. Combine them into, a composite image, or put your own brand, make sure you have the license rights, and, do something unique with them, annotate them with some language, things like that.
Luckily, Mike and I have been advising that since the earliest days of local U. So I'm glad that advice still holds 15 years later.
Do you think this is probably category specific? I mean, an inventory product almost has to be a stock image.
Yeah. Almost.
Right?
From the manufacturer, it's sort of by definition.
By definition, yeah.
Yeah, but I've been seeing a lot of sites lately that are going the extra step, especially on review sites. They're getting the product. They're, even if it's a bottle of vitamins, they're showing it, with their own branding and holding it in their hand, showing the labels from different sides. And I'm not saying that's a ranking factor, but it's that type of effort that's almost needed these days in a highly competitive environment to get ahead.
But do you think that's true with a e-commerce site that's selling standard off-the-shelf products? That's, I guess, in other words, I believe you, and I am I fully support original photography, except when it's totally nonsensical. When you have 10,000 items, they're the same items as everybody else has. A Nikon 700 is a Nikon 700.
Yeah, that's a real. And again, I'm not saying this is a ranking factor, but like, so again, I shop at a vitamin store called iHerb, and they sell, I think they have a catalog of 40,000 vitamins and supplements, and they take the effort to everything that comes in the warehouse, they photograph it, and they're even if it's their brand, someone else's brand, they take a 360 video of it. They put that effort in and they do it. I'm not saying that everybody has to do that, but that's the kind of effort at the very top level that seems to, be a distinguishing factor. Again, and I have clients that don't do that at all. They're just, because that's a lot of effort, and you can do fine without it.
Before we move on to quality raters, what about reviews or testimonials on the website? Did that show any correlation? If you saw that? So
actually, that's something we didn't track. So we did track external reviews, but not reviews listed on the website. But I think I can tell you, just as a human, when you see reviews on a website and you think they're genuine, there's kind of a BS detector that goes off a little bit. But I think that influences you. I think it gives you a more positive experience when you see those things.
Thanks for joining David, Mike, and Greg. To stay on top of the latest developments in local, subscribe to our newsletter at nearmedia.co. We'll see you next week.